Hello everyone and welcome back to the series where I work on the Untitled Plane game. This is the 5th devlog and I have a lot of work to show you since last time. If you're new here, I'm working on a video game that has as of yet no name and which is about trading, flying, puzzle solving, and talking. So let's get right into it. First things first, I should probably talk about the fact that I didn't share any progress I've made over the last 6 months. This is because 1, I was quite a bit busy with other stuff, and 2, I wanted to make enough progress to put into a full-length devlog. I don't think this strategy is viable because as I'm recording this, it's August, and that means it's been 6-7 months since I've shown any work I've done. So what do I do now? I'm thinking of creating a Discord server where instead of having to edit videos, I can write up a text report and send it out that way. However, if you have another idea, send it in the comments below. Moving on to the actual game, I added a crafting table that you'll have to use to complete later more advanced puzzles. Right now though, it's only an idea and a sprite and you won't see me complete it in this devlog. I only mention it because it's in every single clip I have. In the last video, I made a sort of promise that I would change how trade is stored. I followed through on that and now it's represented as 2 numbers and 2 strings. Later I might change it for lists though because not all trades are one type of item for one type of item. Also, I finally finished the 8-directional player sprite and I put it in the game. In regards to the player, I also made them take up more space on the screen than before. At this point I fixed a couple bugs. The first one was that the trades and the dialogue wouldn't go away at the same time when you pressed space. I fixed that pretty easily and so now they go away at the same time. Another one I fixed was where Jaina Peninsula was an island and not a peninsula. You might have noticed this in the last video, but Jaina Peninsula isn't connected to any mainland or continent. To fix this, you'd think I just have to connect it to the mainland, but in the story you're not supposed to go back to the mainland because the story is mainly set on this island. Instead, I created another tile map that was supposed to make it appear like there's a mainland, but the player's not allowed to walk on it, so you can't explore it and find out what's there. In the future, I'll add a fence or something so that the seemingly random wall that you can't see becomes diegetic. But for now, I think it looks and feels a lot more peninsular than before. After that, the next thing I did was finish up the story, which took the majority of the last 7 months. That's partly why this video took so long to make, because I wanted to finish the story before I made this video. Now, writing isn't my particular strong point, you couldn't say that about me, but I'm still confident I made an interesting story anyways. So there's this really famous explorer called Janice Frago. So famous, in fact, that she is the in-universe namesake for Jaina Peninsula and Frago Islands. By the way, I haven't made her sprite yet, so you have to make do with question mark. At the start of the story, Frago has been missing for around 6 months to a year, somewhere in that area. The entire game revolves around you, a bounty hunter who's taken a bounty on her head. That means you'll fly from island to island using trades and crafting and all the stuff I mentioned before to find her. Mild spoilers coming up, so if you don't want to hear that, just skip to the time on screen. By the way, there is another person looking for her who serves as your intermittent rival. I also haven't made his sprite, so I'll depict him with question mark but blue. When I say intermittent rival, I mean something like Gary from Pokemon, who shows up occasionally to taunt you. But your rival will show up more frequently. The story is about you finding her with his help. So remember that map I put in the game to let you choose where to fly to? Yeah, I upgraded it a lot. Here's the story of that. I added the splines package so I could make curved paths between each airport/runway. However, I couldn't get the arrows to show up, no matter what I tried. When I had them selected, I could see the outlines, but not the arrows themselves. At first, I thought it was an issue with the canvas, so I changed the canvas's render mode and almost every other setting after that when that didn't work. Then, I thought that the issue was with the spline itself, so I moved it around, looked through documentation, and found nothing. So I remade it, but to no avail. It was around this time that I accidentally found out that Unity was rendering the spline, but just behind the map. This led me to believe it was actually a problem with the UI and how it was set up. I changed everything about the UI again, trying to find something different. At this point, I created a test arrow to change its settings around because it was getting exhausting trying to fix everything with the splines. But it stretched over the whole camera. That was an easily fixable issue because it wasn't a child of a UI canvas, so I just put it under one. However, I noticed that it was using an image component while the prefabs I were using was using a sprite renderer component. Sprite renderers are how game objects render themselves, not UI. UI uses images. When I found this out, I immediately changed it and it worked. The trajectories were rendering perfectly. Speaking of the map, it now has an outline around it that looks like paper. It doesn't take up the whole screen anymore, and I even animated it opening and closing so it looks like you're taking an actual map out. After this, I also added the trajectory splines everywhere, so now they pop up when you're using them correctly. And here's the full map in action. I know I spent a lot of time in the past on the flight and braking minigames, but I made a huge step forward this time, which was to merge the scenes together so that I could transition between them and share data between them more easily. One example of data that I want to share between the two is the progress that the flight has made so far. So I put a progress bar at the top of the screen that shows how much time/distance there is left to the player. Additionally, when the player switches between the two, I don't want either one to appear suddenly. Since the box game is supposed to take place inside the plane, I opted to go for a zoom in, zoom out. I think that made this part of the game look so cool, even with the current programmer art. There is a problem with this setup though. Currently, when the player enters braking, the birds all go inactive so they don't appear on top of the cargo. This means that you can cheese the birds by entering braking mode and never coming out, meaning you're never going to take a hit. The way I fixed this was with a bit of math. Bear with me. The math isn't that hard. It's only algebra. Here in Desmos, we have a simulation of a screen. Currently, it's a square. Now make it 16 by 9, which is the aspect ratio that I made the screen in the game of. I can do that by just making the borders at 16 and 9. Since this represents the screen of the game, it only makes sense to have some stuff from the flight be represented here as well. Particularly, the plane can be approximated as a horizontally spanning region, because while you're in the braking minigame, the plane isn't moving up or down. Through similar reasoning, the bird can be approximated like that too, but in purple, because they also don't move up or down. I put generic values in for their heights right now because I was too lazy to look up my own code values. Let's just remind ourselves about our goal here after all that work. I'm trying to find the probability that a random bird would hit the plane while it's not moving. Ignoring the literal edge case, since the bird is spawned uniformly randomly, that means the bird has a random chance and the same random chance of spawning everywhere. The position of the plane doesn't matter, so I'm going to put it at 0 to make the math easier. Now the bird hits the plane if any part of it hits the plane, which seems to happen in this range. I'm going to highlight that area green to emphasize that it counts as a hit and the rest of the screen in red. To put this into an equation, notice that the top of the plane is its position plus half of its height, and same for the bird. Subtract half their heights instead to get their bottoms. The top of the defined range is when the plane top is equal to the bird bottom. If you set the two equations equal to each other, particularly if you set y0 plus p over 2 equal to y1 minus b over 2, and solve for y1 since the range is of the bird's positions, you get that it's the average of the two heights. Multiply by -1 to get the bottom. Probability is a percentage though, so what percent of the full range is covered by this area? It's just the height of the range, which is the sum of the heights of the bird and the plane, divided by the height of the full screen, which is 18. The y values go from -9 to 9, not 0 to 9. This result isn't that useful without the actual values, however, but the way the units in Unity are structured is such that the values use the camera's orthographic size, which in this case is 5. So I'll scale it down and then put the actual values for the plane and the bird, which are 0.61 and 0.49 respectively, and the probability is given to be around 11%. So every time a bird spawns, it has an 11% chance of hitting the plane. Since I'm not spawning actual birds though, I'll just divide the time it takes by 0.11, since multiplying a frequency is equivalent to dividing the time by the same number. Another problem was that when the player enters breaking and goes back to flight, the birds all go active again from their same positions. So for that, all I did was randomize the positions when coming back. This simulates time passing and birds changing, but I'm gonna have to change it if I want to add more birds later. And I am going to, just not now. I also added the third and last currency of the game. This is Rook Castle Sand. It's sand from Rook Castle Archipelago and it's abbreviated to RS. This sand is so valuable because it's so thin, unlike the grainy sands of other shores. But just how valuable is it? Well, this is perhaps too much, but one of these bad boys is worth 15 Mesic pearls, or around 300 Janian shells. That makes it the most valuable currency and the most sought after resource you can find. Now that I'm winding down this video, I should probably talk about my goals for the next devlog of this game. Particularly, I want to release this game on Steam and maybe iOS and Android. But if I want to release my game on Steam, I need to have a Steam page as soon as possible. To have a Steam page, I need a description, name, and other stuffs to populate it as soon as possible. To have those things, I need to progress the game as soon as possible. But the main way people see the progress I've made is through these devlogs. All of this is to reiterate, I'm not going to take 6 months for a devlog again, and the next one should only take 1 each. Once again, by the next video, I'm going to try to have a name, finish brainstorming the puzzles, and start creating the Steam page. That should be it for this video, so like, etc. See you in the next one.